Hey, deserving listeners, Ultimatum, Queer Love. Let's watch and see what happens.
Feel.
Yeah. And I don't want you to feel like since I'm here, now you have to be happier and not what you would do even if I wasn't here.
Yeah. I do put on this happy Marita face.
Wow, it's very intuitive of Brittany that she, at the first I was like, that's what's happening, but it sounds like it's on the mark, that Brittany notices that Marita will verbally describe stress but not show any stress or sadness. And Brittany's like, there's that incongruency, as we call it. And then Marita is saying, yeah, I tend to put on a happy face even though deep down I'm not doing well. So it's very intuitive and very inviting of Brittany to point that out there, to invite Marita to be real, right? That's interesting because the way that Marita comes across, the way that people described her, is one of surface level bubbliness, right? And of course, every human has a ton of depth. In fact, the people who often seem lacking of depth usually have been denied the ability to have any kind of depth and have a lot of depth.
I just feel extremely selfless, like almost in a bad way. I don't pay attention to what I need or how to make myself happy.
Okay, so she's saying more along the lines of having to put on a happy face. She's saying, I'm extremely selfless, even in a bad way. So denying herself.
Because I make everybody else around me happy. I feel like it also kind of goes back to my childhood. I'm the youngest of my family, and there was a lot of turmoil in my family.
I'm about to talk about birth order and personality, but as a caveat, I'll say that all of the claims about birth order affecting personality are bullshit. Early in my career, I actually made it a point to read thousands of studies along these lines. There are some studies that show that the youngest, the baby, has the stereotypical personality traits of irresponsibility and youthfulness and being the cute one or something, kind of the way Marita is talking about it. But there is a lot more research demonstrating that that is not the case. There are too many factors that play into one's personality to generalize in that way. But for some, but I will say that for all of us, our personality is affected by our birth order, but you have to look more specifically at the particular family, even for only children, right? But the stereotypes are not, they don't pan out. And there's a lot of stereotypes about birth order, whether it's only or oldest or middle or youngest. But there is potentially one generalization you can make, which is that oldest children might tend, it depends on how you look at the data, might tend to be more conservative than all the later children. And I'm not talking about political points of view. I'm talking about just the way they approach life. You know, they're better at saving or something like that. But that's pretty weak in terms of the signal, meaning that the bell curves are such that you can say that there is a difference there, but it's but if you met an oldest child, the chance that you'd be able to confidently predict that they were more conservative than the average person isn't very strong. So anyway, but for Marita, it's quite possible that she's saying there's a lot of turmoil. So I don't hear people saying those kinds of words lightly. So I don't doubt that. It's probably a lot worse than even the way she's depicting it in this moment, just a guess. And that in at least her role she's stating in the family, maybe as a function of her being the youngest, was to be the happy face, the cute one, and that can sometimes be the case for the youngest, but it can also be for the middle child as well. It just depends. So we're hearing that. That's interesting. Yeah, that'll do it.
And I had to be the one with the positivity and the happy face and make sure that everyone, if they didn't have good relationships with each other, they all could have good relationships with me, or I could mend an issue. But I have carried that into my adult life.
A lot of insight there. It sounds like Marita has thought about it before, maybe in therapy, hard to know. But there's some sophistication there of not just that I had to put on a happy face, but that it served a function and had to do with my sense of safety. You know, if people could get along with each other, then I felt like I had a good relationship with them. But it wasn't really a good relationship with me. It was just that I served a function for the family.
But I want you to put yourself first. If you need to say no, say no. Once you do it, you're like, oh, I feel like this feels so good. I actually did something for me, and I'm not like spreading myself thin.
Yeah, great. And it's easier said than done. And Brittany is recognizing that, I think, by saying, you know, I don't want to tell you what to do, but if you want to say no, go for it.
Yeah.
So
even with work, I feel like I owe everybody everything.
And to put a fine point on it, I've worked with some clients for years and years on this very issue. And even though the client within the first few months absolutely identifies themselves as being a people pleaser, as someone who puts themselves on the back burner for other people's sake, even though they understand it forwards and backwards, even though they might even be able to see it in the moment as they're doing it, if they have a moderate to severe level of trauma and neurological development that kicks in those moments, it can be extremely hard to dislodge that pattern. The intellect, our conscious mind, can know something, but the rest of our mind and our body will not believe it. You know, just think about for yourself the intrusive thoughts and the ideas and beliefs that you have that you know are irrational, like I'm doomed to fail, or no one will ever love me, or I'm not a good person, whatever. You know, there's a fairly long list, but, you know, a lot of them are common to people. You can intellectually understand, for the most part, that is irrational based on trauma that made you believe that, but it wasn't true ever. And yet, with a lot of therapy, you'll still basically most of the time default to that belief. It's just hard. So I say all that because I think oftentimes in our positive psychology, cognitive therapy world, it tends to be framed as, well, just stop believing that. Just tell yourself something different, or act as if. And all that is fine and great and can help for sure, but it can leave people with the idea that if they can't turn it around, there's something wrong with them, or they're not trying hard enough, or the individual will just go into denial about it. It's like, well, I've told myself consciously that isn't true. And even though I feel like it kind of is, I'm just going to deny that I still feel that way because I, consciously. So it's hard, and really just reiterates and emphasizes how important it is that we help young families with how they parent and help young families with stress. It's shown in the research that if we can relieve the financial pressures of families that have young children, then parents are much better able to act in a differentiated way. All parents have a range of how they're going to react, from healthy to unhealthy. Different parents have different ranges, but we all have a range. And when you stress out a parent, then you're going to get more of the dysfunctional side of parenting. And so and that's just one of the things we can do to not only morally help people, but also set up a better society, one with less crime, less conspiratorial mindedness, less fighting political, less fighting with your neighbors, less drop out of school, less drug addiction, all those things. Anyway, I've at least at some point during a series of watching a show, I have to say that, and I'm passionate about it. Actually, Stacy and I years ago thought, what could we do with our platform, Psychology in Seattle? And the thing that we both landed on was to create a foundation, an organization, an association of some sort that promoted these ideas, funded research, promoted research, gathered research, and even implemented programs for families of young children. Because if we can help that, and I'm not just talking about people on welfare, for example. I'm talking about across the spectrum, socioeconomically, culturally. We all understand that rich families can produce fucked up kids, right? So there's a lot of ways that young families, young parents of new kids can benefit from a variety of different interventions, some of which don't have to be particularly involved. Just like a 5-week class that meets once or twice a week, and you just learn about attachment styles and attachment parenting. So, rant over.
I'm not getting fulfilled in any type of way. Economically, emotionally, physically, like nothing from work. But
Okay, so we're hearing from Marita that at baseline, she's not getting any of her needs met, that her life is not oriented towards her needs, which is not uncommon for people from that background. And she sees that, which is great. A lot of people don't see that. So seeing it is the first step.
I feel like I owe them my best.
That sounds very similar to other things in your life.
Yeah. So the temptation is to conclude that Ashley is a bad partner, which could be. But it's also possible that Ashley is a good enough partner, but because Marita isn't getting any of her needs met and has never gotten any of her needs met, Ashley gets the brunt of it, that Marita displaces or transfers onto Ashley. Because, if you recall from maybe the first episode that I posted, Marita was complaining to Ashley's face that she wasn't getting any of her needs met in the relationship with Ashley, because Ashley's the one giving the ultimatum. And Marita's saying, I feel empty. So is that a reflection of the reality of the relationship between Ashley and Marita, or is that, at least in part, if not fully, a result of displacement, meaning that Ashley is doing things to meet Marita's needs, but because Marita is overwhelmed with the lack of her entire life and other aspects of her current life meeting her needs, she just generally feels like nothing is getting her needs met and can't even recognize or be open to the way Ashley might be meeting her needs. It's also possible that Marita would choose a partner who fits within that expectation of not meeting needs and found someone that would accommodate her in that self-denial. But it would explain why Ashley will say things like, I don't know, I feel like I'm doing a lot and you're not appreciating it at all. And it also explains why Marita was speaking so strongly that, so there's a scenario in which Ashley is denying, maybe because of her own traumas, probably if true, then because of her own traumas. Then it's possible that Ashley is giving some things, but Marita just can't receive it because of just how overwhelmed she is and just how angry she is. The analogy that I give sometimes is that you're helping your daughter learn how to ride the bike, and she is saying, I can do it on my own. Let go of the seat. I can do it on my own. I know what I'm doing. And you're just like, I don't know if you know what you're doing. And then after a while, you're like, okay, I'll let go. And she's like, okay, thanks. And then she crashes and she skins her knee. And you come up and you feel sad. And she says, why did you let go of the seat? And you're like, you were begging me for a long time and angry at me for not doing it. But you don't say that because you understand that she's in a particular way. And similarly, when we are in a state of constantly falling and skinning our knee, if an Ashley comes up to us and loves us, it just feels like yet another, or it's not exactly the way we want it. It just feels like yet another denial, So I don't know if that analogy works, but I hope you get my point. So, but I will commend Marita, especially given her age. I mean, not to denigrate 25-year-olds, but it's learning these things after leaving your family of origin. It takes a lot of time. And research even shows that until you're about 30 years old, it's often hard to even accept that these things can be possible. Not that 25-year-olds can't have that. They can for sure. It just means that they have to really push against a lot of life stage tendency to concentrate on other things. So I really commend Marita for recognizing this and having a lot of nuance to the way she's talking about it.
What do you mean?
You know exactly what I'm referring to. I want you to stand up for yourself, know what you want, demand what you want, and accept absolutely nothing less. Don't feel like you have to suppress your feelings for the comfort of somebody else.
And it's great that Brittany is saying this, and maybe this will help Marita, but I don't imagine that this... I've had so many conversations with people in Marita's shoes that this conversation will not fix the problem. Not that Brittany is being wrong or harmful in any way, but if I were Brittany, I wouldn't have much expectation. But this is the start. You know, this is the exact thing you should communicate if you're in Brittany's shoes, because the implication is that Marita is doing it with Brittany, because that's how the conversation started. That Brittany will have a horrible day at work, come home, and it's so horrible that she has to say, oh my God, it was so horrible. But then she acts like everything's happy. And Brittany's like, you don't have to do it with me. So I invite you to be whoever you are and express however you are. You deserve to be that way. So, which is great.
You feel how you feel.
Yeah.
And you kind of have to develop that, because if not, your own peace is going to suffer.
Wow. I'm growing.
You are. I'm done with the spiel.
I loved that. I needed to hear that.
Okay. So Marita is expressing that was helpful. So thumbs up for Brittany. All right. Well, let's adjourn there for now. And everyone out there, please, I want to remind you to seriously take care of yourself. Take care of others. Think about our needs. Look past the BS and the keeping up with the Joneses and the capitalistic materialism and the oppressive nature of our society around emotions and needs and vulnerability. And look past all that. Take care of yourself and other people. We can all do this together because we all deserve it. We really, really do.